People say a place doesn't really change after dark. I used to believe that too. Then one night proved me wrong. Even now, whenever someone mentions a blood moon, I feel my stomach tighten. I don't laugh anymore. I don't ask questions. I just remember. There are nights I wish I could forget. That wasn't one of them. Because forgetting would be impossible. Some memories don't fade. They just wait, quietly, for the right moment to come back. And mine always begins with a blood-red moon.
3 years ago, life felt simple. There were 4 of us: Daniel, Toby, Grace, and me. We'd grown up in the same small farming town where everyone knew each other's names. When news spread about the upcoming blood moon, people online treated it like a rare event worth celebrating. Our town didn't. Nobody seemed excited. If anything, people became strangely quiet whenever it came up. Still, Daniel had found an abandoned fire lookout tower deep in the hills. He thought it would be the perfect place to watch the eclipse away from city lights. It sounded harmless. Just 4 friends chasing a good view. Looking back, I wish we'd stayed home.
Before leaving, I stopped by my grandmother's house. She was sitting outside, watching the evening sky. When I mentioned the blood moon, she didn't smile. She didn't even answer right away. Finally, she looked at me and quietly said, "Stay inside after the moon changes color." That was it. No explanation, no story, just a warning. I asked her why. She looked away for a moment before saying, "Some questions aren't worth answers." At the time, I thought she was just being superstitious. Now, I wonder how much she already knew. The drive took less than an hour. Nothing unusual happened. We joked, played music, talked about who would get the best pictures of the eclipse. Everything felt normal until we stepped into the forest. The silence hit me first. Not complete silence, just the feeling that something was missing. There were no birds, no insects, no distant sounds, only our footsteps. Grace stopped walking for a second. She looked around and quietly asked, "Doesn't this place feel empty?" Daniel laughed. I laughed too, mostly because I didn't know what else to do. The trail finally opened into a clearing. Standing in the middle of it was the old fire lookout tower. It looked forgotten, weathered, crooked, but somehow still standing. Daniel couldn't wait to climb it. The rest of us followed. Step by step, the forest stretched farther beneath us. When we reached the top, the view was incredible. Miles of trees. No houses, no roads, nothing. For a moment, it felt peaceful. I didn't realize we were already trapped. We watched the eclipse in complete silence. Little by little, the moon disappeared into shadow. Then, it returned. Only this time, it wasn't silver anymore. It was deep red. Almost immediately, the forest below looked different. The trees seemed taller. The shadows looked deeper. Even the air felt heavier. None of it made sense, but every one of us noticed it. Nobody said anything for several seconds. We were all waiting for someone else to explain what we were seeing. No one could. Toby was the first to point toward the valley. "Do you guys see that?" At first, I thought he was looking at campers. Scattered across the trees were tiny white lights. There were too many to count. They weren't flashing. They weren't swaying like lanterns. They just glowed. Completely still. The longer I looked, the more uncomfortable I became. It felt less like we had discovered something, and more like something had already discovered us.
None of us wanted to say that out loud.
Daniel lifted his camera and zoomed in. Click. He checked the screen. Nothing. Just an empty stretch of forest. He frowned and tried again. Click. Still nothing. I looked up. The lights were still there, clear as day. Daniel lowered the camera. They hadn't moved. He raised it again. Gone. Camera down. They returned. It happened every single time. Grace tried using her phone. So did I. Every screen showed the exact same thing. An ordinary forest. But with our own eyes, we knew it wasn't. That was the moment our excitement disappeared. Grace never raised her voice. She simply whispered, "I think they're getting closer." At first, I wanted to tell her she was imagining it. Then I looked again. She was right. Every light had changed direction. They weren't wandering through the forest anymore. They were moving together, straight toward us. Slowly, almost patiently, like they already knew exactly where we were. Nobody spoke. The only sound was the wind brushing against the old wooden tower. And somehow, that made everything feel even worse. Nobody argued. We grabbed our bags and hurried toward the stairs. The old tower groaned beneath our weight. Halfway down, my flashlight caught something carved into the wooden railing. I stopped without thinking. The words were faded, old enough to have been there for years. I leaned closer. "Don't look back when the moon is red." Before I could say anything, Toby grabbed my arm. "Move!" His voice snapped me out of it. I took one last look at the message. Then we ran. The trail should have been easy to follow. We'd only climbed it an hour earlier. But suddenly, nothing looked familiar. Trees stood where I didn't remember seeing them. The path seemed narrower, longer, twisted. I checked my phone. No signal. Daniel pulled out a compass. The needle spun in slow circles without stopping. Nobody said the word, but we were all thinking it. We were lost. And somehow, it felt like the forest wanted it that way. It started with a single sound. Crunch. Another. Crunch. We all stopped walking. The footsteps stopped too. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. After a few seconds, Daniel started walking again. Crunch. 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 The footsteps returned. Always behind us. Always matching our pace. Every time we stopped, they stopped. Every time we moved, they followed. I pointed my flashlight into the trees. There was nothing there. At least, nothing I could see. That was when I realized being alone would have been less frightening. Grace slowly turned around. None of us tried to stop her. I don't know if we were too scared Part of us wanted to know what had been following us. She looked into the trees for several long seconds. At first, nothing happened. Then, her shoulders relaxed. The fear disappeared from her face. She wasn't relieved. She just looked empty. I called her name once, then again. She didn't even blink. It was like she was listening to someone standing just beyond the trees. Someone the rest of us couldn't hear. That's when I realized, whatever she was looking at, it was looking back. Without taking her eyes off the trees, Grace whispered, "They're not lights." Her voice was calm. Too calm. Not frightened. Not confused. Just certain. Then she started walking. Slowly. Deliberately. Straight toward the forest. I reached for her. She didn't react. Daniel shouted her name. Nothing. It was like she couldn't hear us anymore. Or maybe she didn't want to. Watching her walk away without hesitation was somehow more terrifying than if she had screamed. Daniel lunged forward and grabbed her backpack. For 1 second, I thought he'd stopped her. Then Grace calmly slipped out of the straps. She didn't struggle. She didn't even look back. Daniel was left standing there, holding nothing but her backpack. Grace just kept walking. Steady. Unhurried. Like someone followed. The closer Grace got, the clearer everything became. Those weren't floating lights. They were reflections. Hundreds of them. Pairs of pale eyes, scattered between the trees. None of them blinked. None of them moved. They simply watched. I tried counting them. I couldn't. There were too many. The strange part wasn't what I saw. It was what I didn't. Bodies, shapes, anything. Just eyes. Watching us from the darkness. I've spent years trying to convince myself there was another explanation. I've never found one. Grace crossed the last few steps between the trees. The fog swallowed her first. Then the darkness did the rest. She never looked back. Daniel tried to run after her. Toby grabbed him before he could. Neither of them said a word. Neither did I. The eyes were gone. Every single one of them. The forest became completely silent. No footsteps. No wind. Nothing. Then, somewhere far away, Grace laughed. Just once. Quietly. And then, nothing. None of us said it. We just ran. Branches scraped against our jackets. Our flashlights shook so badly they barely lit the trail. I didn't know where we were going. I only knew I couldn't stop. Every few seconds, I wanted to look behind me, to see if something was following us. Then, I remembered the warning carved into the tower. Don't look back when the moon is red. So I didn't. I kept my eyes forward. I don't know if that warning saved us, or if it simply delayed whatever had already started. Either way, none of us spoke until we reached the truck. We reached the truck so fast that I barely clearly remember unlocking the doors. We climbed inside, locked every door, and Daniel started the engine without saying a word. The tires threw gravel behind us as we sped toward the highway. For the first few minutes, nobody spoke. We were too busy trying to convince ourselves we made it out. Then, I noticed Daniel staring into the rearview mirror. His hands tightened around the steering wheel. The color drained from his face. I asked him what was wrong. He didn't answer. Not until the forest had disappeared behind us. Finally, he whispered.
There was someone standing in the road. I turned around. There was nothing there. Toby hadn't seen anyone either. But Daniel never changed his story. He said the figure wasn't chasing us. It was just watching us leave. Somehow, that felt even worse.
Police arrived early the next morning. Search teams spread across the hills. Dogs followed every trail they could find. They searched for hours, then days. Nothing. Not a footprint, not a piece of clothing, not even a broken branch that could explain where Grace had gone. The strangest part? The forest looked completely normal. Birds were singing again. The wind had returned. It was the same place. And yet, it felt like the forest had erased every trace of what happened.
Almost as if it had been expecting us to come back.
About a week later, Daniel finally looked through the photographs from his camera. The glowing lights weren't there. Every picture showed an ordinary forest. At least, that's what we thought. He kept staring at one photo longer than the others. Then another. Then another. Every single picture had the same thing. Far in the background, standing between the trees, was a person. Always the same distance away. Always standing perfectly still. Even in pictures taken in different directions. Daniel never tried to explain it. He quietly deleted every photograph. And after that, he refused to talk about that night ever again. A year passed. Life slowly returned to normal. At least, it looked normal from the outside. But every time I thought about that night, I found myself looking over my shoulder. When the next blood moon was announced, I didn't make plans. I didn't go outside. I locked every door, closed every curtain, turned off every light facing the windows. It probably sounds ridiculous. Maybe it is. But after what happened, I wasn't willing to take chances. Not again. It was close to midnight. My phone buzzed on the table beside me. No name, no number I recognized. Just a single message. No words, only a photograph. The moment I opened it, I felt my heart sink. It was the old fire lookout tower, the same one we'd climbed, the same blood-red moon hanging above it. For a second, I couldn't breathe, because someone had been there, recently, watching. I zoomed in. There were 4 people standing on the tower. 3 of them were facing the camera. The 4th had their back turned. They were wearing Grace's jacket. Then I noticed something else. Standing behind them was another figure, perfectly still, looking directly into the camera. That's when I understood what I was really looking at. If that figure was standing behind the others, then someone else had taken the photograph. I never told Daniel. I never told Toby. Sometimes, the less people know, the safer they are. The next blood moon is only a few months away. I don't know what waits in those woods, and I have no intention of finding out. But if you ever hear someone warn you not to look back, I'd listen.